Turned away by all, the mail-order bride finally found shelter with a solitary cowboy, not knowing he was kind at heart. Ilara Vin sat on the edge of the shuttle platform, her hands tightly clasped over the straps of her small bag. The winds of the frontier world whispered against the metal of the docking bay, carrying the faint scent of dry soil and strange blossoms that grew only in this part of the galaxy. She had imagined this moment for months, leaving the crowded arcologies of Earth for a new life, but the excitement that had once burned in her chest had cooled into anxiety. She looked down the long stretch of dirt road leading away from the settlement. Small domed houses and a few scattered vehicles glimmered in the fading light. Already, the colony's inhabitants were beginning to disappear into their homes. Ilara had been sent as a mail-order bride, a chance to bring a companion to one of the settlers on this frontier planet. In theory, it should have been simple. Her skills, her letters, and the colony's need for people should have guaranteed her placement. But so far, it had not been simple at all. The first man, a miner named Corin, had glanced at her for barely a minute before shaking his head. "Too fragile for this place," he had said. The second, a young rancher named Jalen, had smirked at her boots. "You're too fancy," he said. "We need someone who can work the soil, not the table." And so it went, one rejection after another. Each no left Ilara feeling smaller, more invisible under the enormous twin suns. She drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders. It was thin, and the cold of the desert-like evenings was creeping in. Her heart ached, not just from exhaustion but from the growing realization that she might be alone here, in a world as strange as it was beautiful. She had come here with hope and trust, with a belief that humans, no matter where they were, could see her worth. But the colony had turned her away, one by one. The thought of spending the night alone in the open made her stomach twist. She glanced toward the hills that marked the edge of the settlement. Beyond them lay unclaimed lands, rough and wild, but perhaps with shelter. Her mind raced with possibilities. Surely there was someone somewhere who might show a stranger the basic kindness of a roof and a meal. It was then she saw it, a small house, isolated against the rolling hills, with smoke curling from a chimney. The windows glinted as the sun's last rays touched them. The house looked old but well kept, a sign of care in a world where many things were abandoned to the harsh environment. Ilara's heart leapt. Perhaps this was it, the last chance for safety tonight. Her feet carried her forward, the loose dirt crunching under her boots. Each step was heavy with anticipation and fear. She had never approached strangers on her own, never had to plead for a place to stay. Yet here she was, walking toward a home that might reject her just as the others had. When she reached the small wooden door, she hesitated. A part of her wanted to turn back, to find a hollow shelter among the rocks or under the stars. But another part, the stronger, braver part, urged her forward. She knocked, lightly at first, then more insistently. The door creaked open and a man appeared. He was tall, with broad shoulders and strong hands, but his face was weathered, lined by sun and wind. His eyes, sharp and observant, softened slightly when they met hers. "You lost." His voice was calm, but there was a caution in it, as if he had long been unused to company. I don't have anywhere to stay tonight," Ilara said, her voice trembling despite her best effort at steadiness. I was hoping you could help me." The man studied her for a long moment. He didn't speak, only let the silence stretch. Ilara felt her heart sink. Maybe this would be the same as the others. Maybe he would shut the door and leave her in the cold. Then slowly he stepped aside. "Come in," he said. Relief flooded through her. She stepped over the threshold, immediately aware of the warmth and quiet of the house. It was simple inside, but neat. A small table held a pot of tea, and a fire glowed softly in the hearth. Everything smelled of clean wood and earth, not the harsh chemicals of the colony or the cold metal of the docking bays. "I'm Calder," the man said, finally introducing himself. "Calder Hale, I keep to myself mostly." "Ilara Ven," she replied, her voice steadier now. "I thank you for letting me in." He nodded once and returned to the hearth, adding a few more pieces of firewood. Alara noticed the careful way he worked, each movement precise yet gentle. There was no rush, no unnecessary noise. For the first time in many hours, she felt a strange sense of calm. "Sit," Calder said, gesturing to a chair near the fire. "You look tired." Alara sank into the chair, feeling the stiffness in her legs slowly relax. She watched him move around the small room, arranging things with quiet efficiency. He didn't ask questions about where she had come from or why she was alone. There was no judgment in his eyes, only a steady, quiet presence that made her feel safe. I didn't know anyone here would take me in," she admitted after a moment. "Most don't," Calder replied, "but some do. I've found it's easier to help than to ignore. Life's hard enough without making it harder for others." Alara felt a lump in her throat. His words were simple, but they carried a weight she hadn't expected. Here was someone who didn't know her, yet didn't turn her away. Someone who offered kindness without asking for anything in return. The fire crackled between them, filling the room with warmth and quiet sound. Outside, the winds of kestrels reached blue against the walls, but inside there was a small pocket of safety, a space carved out by one man's decision to care. "You must be hungry," Calder said after a moment, turning toward the small kitchen area. "I have stew." "Not much, but it's warm." Alara shook her head, smiling faintly. I would like some, thank you." He served her carefully, setting the bowl on the table and sitting opposite her. They ate in silence for a while, the kind of silence that wasn't awkward but comfortable. Every bite reminded her that she had made the right choice in coming here. Even if the rest of the colony had rejected her, even if the stars seemed too vast and lonely, she had found a place to rest. After the meal, Calder gestured toward a small bed in a corner of the room. "You can sleep here tonight. Tomorrow we'll see about other arrangements." Alara hesitated, then nodded. "Thank you, really." As she lay under the simple blanket, listening to the soft creak of the house settling and the faint whistle of wind outside, she realized something. For the first time since leaving Earth, she felt the stirrings of hope. The universe was vast and indifferent, yes, but there were still humans who chose to be kind. Humans who made a difference not with power or wealth, but with small, quiet acts. And tonight, one of those humans was Calder Hale. Alara closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the fire seep into her bones. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, new uncertainties, but tonight she had shelter. Tonight she had someone who cared enough to open a door, and for a frontier as harsh as this, that was worth more than any contract or promise. The twin suns had disappeared completely behind the hills, leaving a blanket of stars above. Alara's last thought before sleep claimed her was simple. Maybe, just maybe, this was where she was meant to be. The morning sun peeked over the jagged hills of Kestrel's Reach, spilling gold across the barren plains. The twin suns were still low on the horizon, but already the air carried a faint warmth that promised a day of clear skies. Alara Venn stirred beneath the thin blanket, careful not to wake Calder. For the first time since arriving on this strange planet, she had slept deeply, free from fear and exhaustion. Her body ached slightly from the journey and the constant tension of rejection, but her spirit felt lighter than it had in months. She rose quietly, careful to make as little noise as possible. The house was modest but orderly. Every tool, every pot seemed to have a place. A small table near the window held Calder's breakfast, 2 bowls of steaming porridge, a few dried fruits, and a cup of weak tea. The smell of warmth and simplicity filled the room. Alara swallowed a lump in her throat. She had expected cold silence or indifference when she woke, but instead, she found a quiet routine that felt comforting, almost like home. Calder appeared in the doorway, his dark hair slightly tousled, the early sun highlighting the weathered lines of his face. He nodded at her, a small gesture of acknowledgement. "Morning," he said simply. "Porridge is ready." "Thank you," Alara replied softly, sitting at the table. She poured a small amount of honey from a jar and stirred it into her bowl. The warmth of the food spread through her chest, chasing away the last remnants of fear. For a few moments they ate in silence. The only sounds were the soft clinking of spoons and the faint hiss of the morning wind outside. It was peaceful in a way she had never known. On Earth, even in the quietest places, there was always noise. The hum of machinery, the chatter of neighbors, the endless rush of life. Here in this remote homestead, life moved slowly, deliberately, and with purpose. After breakfast, Calder spoke. "If you're staying a while, you should know a few things about living here. Water is limited, the sun can be harsh, and nights get cold. The soil is rough and the plants take care to survive." Alara nodded, listening intently. I want to learn, I want to do whatever is needed." Calder studied her for a moment, his eyes sharp and assessing, and then he smiled faintly. "That's good. You'll need patience more than anything else, and a willingness to watch and listen." For the rest of the morning, he showed her the small routines that kept the homestead running. There was a cistern he used to collect and filter water, carefully maintained with pumps and simple machinery. The garden was small but thriving, planted with hardy crops that could survive the harsh climate. Calder explained the basics: when to water, how to tend the soil, and how to protect the plants from the biting wind. Alara watched him carefully, trying to memorize every step. He moved with confidence, each motion purposeful but gentle, as if he understood the fragility of life in this world. When he handed her a watering can and nodded, she realized he trusted her to do the work herself. There was no criticism, no correction, only quiet guidance. By midday, Alara's arms ached from lifting buckets and tending the garden, but she felt a sense of accomplishment she had not known in months. Calder brought out a small bundle of cloths and showed her how to patch torn tools and mend clothing. Even in his silence, he taught her more than words could convey: careful observation, patience, respect for labor, and the importance of tending to every small detail. As they worked, Calder finally spoke about himself, slowly and deliberately. "I was once part of the colony proper," he said, his voice low, carrying a hint of nostalgia. "I was an engineer, helped build some of the systems you saw when you arrived. But the colony, it wasn't for me. Too crowded, too loud. People depended on things they didn't understand. And when systems failed, they often blamed the humans instead of learning." Alara nodded, listening. She felt a strange kinship with him, though she barely knew him. She too had felt out of place, judged for things beyond her control, rejected for reasons she could not change. She understood the loneliness he must have chosen, not from hatred but from necessity. "The people here, they see me as strange," Calder continued. "I keep to myself because it's easier, but it doesn't mean I don't care. I fix what I can, plant what I can, and make life a little easier for anyone who comes this way, even strangers." Alara smiled softly. I think that's wonderful. I wish more people were like you." Calder gave a small shrug. "Maybe they are in their own ways. Just not always where you expect." By the afternoon, they had finished most of the chores. Alara was sweaty, dusty, and tired, but for the first time she felt she belonged somewhere. Calder poured them both a cup of tea and they sat outside, watching the hills glow under the afternoon sun. The wind was gentle now, carrying the faint scent of the wildflowers that grew along the rocks. "You'll need to rest tomorrow," Calder said. "We have more work to do before the end of the week, but don't worry, I'll show you everything slowly." Alara nodded. "I want to learn everything. I want to be useful. I don't want to be a burden." "You won't be," Calder replied, his voice calm and certain. "Everyone has something they can give. Here, even the smallest contribution matters." The two of them sat in companionable silence, watching the sun begin its slow descent. Alara felt a growing sense of hope. The world beyond the homestead was still vast, still lonely, but here she had warmth, safety, and the chance to prove herself. She had been rejected everywhere else but Calder's home. his kindness, his patience, his quiet strength, offered her something more valuable than any contract or arrangement: trust. When night fell, they lit the lanterns outside, casting a soft glow over the small homestead. Calder prepared a simple dinner of bread, cheese, and roasted vegetables. As they ate, he asked her about Earth, about her childhood, and about the letters she had written to prospective husbands. Alara shared her stories, hesitant at first but encouraged by his gentle listening. He never interrupted, never judged, and never offered advice unless she asked. After dinner, Calder showed her the small library he kept. It was modest, containing a mix of technical manuals, journals, and a few books of fiction. He explained that he read often, both to learn and to remember what humanity had built on Earth. Alara wandered through the shelves, running her fingers along the spines, feeling the history and care embedded in each volume. "You should take one," Calder said. "Something to pass the evening, helps to keep your mind sharp." Alara selected a book of human stories and settled into a chair near the fire. Calder watched her for a moment, then returned to his own seat, quietly tending the fire. She opened the book, and for the first time in weeks, she felt calm and focused. The stories of human ingenuity, bravery, and resilience filled her mind, echoing the very qualities she saw in Calder himself. As the night deepened, the twin moons of Kestrel's Reach rose into the sky, bathing the homestead in silver light. The wind whispered through the hills, carrying the faint scent of distant flora. Alara closed her book and looked at Calder, who was adjusting the firewood. She realized she did not feel the fear she had carried since leaving Earth. She felt safe. She felt welcomed. She felt at home. "Thank you," she said softly. Calder looked up, a small, almost imperceptible smile on his face. "For what?" he asked, though he already knew. "For letting me stay, for teaching me, for just being kind." He nodded once. "Everyone deserves a little kindness," he said, "even someone who doesn't expect it." Alara lay in the small bed again that night, thinking about the day. She had learned so much already. How to tend plants, how to care for simple machinery, how to read the signs of weather and wind. But more importantly, she had learned something she had never known before: that humanity's greatest strength was not just survival or intelligence, but the quiet courage to help others when no one is watching. And in Calder Hale, she had found that courage. The morning light spilled gently over Kestrel's Reach, washing the small homestead in a golden hue. Alara awoke to the familiar sound of wind brushing across the hills and the faint hum of distant machinery that Calder had carefully maintained. She stretched and looked around, feeling a sense of belonging she had never imagined possible. Life here was hard, yes, but it was honest and quiet, and for the first time she felt her presence mattered. After a simple breakfast, Calder handed her a small metal tray. On it were tools and pieces of equipment that she had yet to understand. "Today, we'll work on the water system," he said simply. "It's old and temperamental, but it keeps this homestead alive." Alara nodded eagerly, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The water system had always been a mystery to her. On Earth, water came at the turn of a tap without thought or effort. Here, every drop had been carefully collected, filtered, and conserved. Mistakes were costly. Calder guided her step by step, showing her how to check the pipes, tighten fittings, and test the pressure valves. At first, the tools felt foreign in her hands, but Calder's calm presence made it easier. He never rushed her, never criticized her mistakes, only pointed out gently what needed correction. "You have a careful hand," Calder observed. "That will serve you well here." Alara smiled faintly. Praise was rare in her life, especially the kind that didn't carry expectation or judgment. She worked diligently, tightening bolts and checking connections, and gradually she felt a strange pride. She was contributing, making a difference, helping sustain life on this remote planet. By midday, the system hummed quietly, operating smoothly once again. Ilara wiped the sweat from her brow and allowed herself a moment to enjoy the small victory. Calder handed her a cup of water from the fresh supply and she drank deeply, feeling the life-giving liquid fill her body. "Good work," Calder said. He didn't exaggerate, didn't heap empty praise, but the words were enough. They were sincere. The afternoon was spent in the garden. Ilara learned the rhythms of the soil, how to plant seeds in shallow rows, how to identify which plants needed water and which could survive longer without attention. Calder moved beside her, occasionally demonstrating a technique, occasionally stepping back to let her find her own way. "You'll learn faster by doing than by watching," he explained. "Humans are built for action. Observation helps, but effort completes the lesson." Ilara nodded, feeling the truth of his words. There was something about the frontier, the open spaces, the constant demand of survival that made her feel alive in a way she never had before. Life here was not about perfection or comfort. It was about persistence, patience, and care. As the day passed, Calder shared stories of his past. He spoke of the early days of the colony, of machines breaking down and people abandoning their posts, of nights spent under the stars fixing systems no one else would touch. Ilara listened with fascination. She could sense the quiet strength in him, a resilience born of necessity and choice. Calder was not a man who sought recognition or praise. He did the work because it needed doing, because someone had to care when others would not. "I stayed behind," Calder admitted one afternoon as they repaired a small solar panel, "because I knew the systems would fail without attention. And without the systems, the colony wouldn't survive. People left, thinking they could start over elsewhere. But life is not that simple. You cannot abandon what sustains you, not if you care." Ilara felt a deep admiration for him. She had been rejected so many times, often for superficial reasons, but Calder had never judged her. He had offered her shelter, guidance, and trust. In his quiet way, he was showing her the best of humanity, the choice to care when no one is watching, the courage to take responsibility when it is easier to ignore. By evening, they finished the day's work. The garden was tended, the water system running smoothly, and the homestead humming with quiet efficiency. Calder prepared a simple meal while Ilara cleaned the tools and organized supplies. "You've done well today," Calder said as they sat down to eat. "Tomorrow we'll check the livestock and repair the fences. It's not exciting work, but it is necessary." Ilara nodded, feeling content. The work was hard, sometimes exhausting, but it was meaningful. Every action had purpose, every effort contributed to survival and comfort. Here, she was not judged for her appearance, her past, or her mistakes. She was valued for her hands, her heart, and her willingness to try. After dinner, Calder suggested a walk. They moved quietly across the hills, the twin moons rising slowly into the night sky. The landscape shimmered in silver light, the distant mountains casting long shadows. Ilara felt a sense of peace she had never known in the bustling cities of Earth. Here, in the quiet frontier, life felt honest and pure. "You see the stars differently here," Calder said softly, pointing to a cluster of distant suns. "On Earth, the sky is full of lights from cities and machines. Here you can see the universe as it is, vast, silent, and full of potential." Ilara nodded, staring at the countless points of light. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It makes me feel small but not scared, just aware." "Good," Calder replied. "That awareness is important. You learn to respect the universe but also to respect yourself. Humans endure because we adapt, because we care, because we do what is needed even when it's hard." Ilara thought about his words. She had faced rejection, uncertainty, and fear, yet she had endured. She had adapted to a strange world, learned new skills, and found trust in someone who had every right to ignore her. She felt a growing pride, a sense of belonging she had never imagined possible. The nights on Kestrel's Reach were cold, but the fire in the homestead and the warmth of Calder's steady presence made her feel safe. Each day brought new tasks, new lessons, and new victories. The work was hard, but it was honest, and Alara found joy in every small accomplishment. As the days turned into weeks, Alara began to notice subtle changes in herself. She was stronger, more confident, more capable. The fear that had once held her back was slowly replaced by determination. She understood now that life on the frontier was not about comfort or ease. It was about resilience, kindness, and persistence. One afternoon, while mending a torn tarp over the water cistern, Calder spoke again. "You've learned fast," he said. "Faster than I expected. Not just the work, but the way you think. You watch, you listen, you act. Those are qualities humans need in this world." Alara felt a flush of pride. I want to be useful," she said. "I don't want to just exist here, I want to contribute." "You are," Calder replied quietly. "Every day, every action, every choice to help, that's what matters, that's what humans do best." Alara smiled, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Here, on this remote world, she had found more than survival. She had found purpose, connection, and hope. Calder's kindness had given her a chance, but her own determination and effort had allowed her to grow. She realized that the frontier was not just a place of hardship, it was a place of opportunity, a canvas for humans to show their best qualities: patience, skill, courage, and care. As the sun set behind the distant hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Alara sat beside Calder, watching the stars appear. The world beyond the homestead was still vast and unknown, but for the first time, she felt ready to face it. She was no longer the bride turned away by all. She was a human being, capable and resilient, living on a frontier that tested and rewarded her spirit. Calder glanced at her and gave a small nod. "Tomorrow, we'll start on the fences and check the livestock." Another day, another set of tasks, but remember, what you do here matters. Every small action contributes to life, survival, and hope. Alara looked at him, her heart swelling with gratitude and admiration. She realized that kindness, trust, and persistence were stronger than fear or loneliness. Here, she had found a place where humans could thrive, not through power or wealth, but through care, effort, and connection. As night fell, the homestead glowed softly under the moons, a beacon of warmth and life on a world that could have been harsh and unyielding. Alara lay in bed that night, reflecting on the day's work, the lessons learned, and the quiet courage of Calder Hale. She understood now that humanity's greatest strength was its ability to endure, to adapt, and to care. And in this small homestead on the edge of Kestrel's Reach, she had witnessed that strength firsthand. For the first time, she felt at home, not in the city she had left behind, not in the contracts she had signed, not in the letters she had sent. Here, in the quiet frontier, surrounded by the harsh beauty of an alien world, Alara had found purpose, belonging, and hope. And tomorrow, she would continue to grow, to learn, and to contribute, side by side with Calder, a man whose quiet kindness revealed the very best of humanity. The morning light of Kestrel's Reach was softer than usual, a pale gold spilling across the hills. Alara then woke to the familiar hum of the homestead's water system and the low creak of the floorboards as Calder moved about. Today was not a regular day. Calder had sensed something unusual the night before, a small shift in the wind, a faint tremor in the distant hills. The colony's communication systems had sent a message overnight, a rare alert about potential trouble in the main settlement. "Alara," Calder said as she poured the morning tea, "we might need to travel to the settlement later today. Something's wrong with the water recyclers. They've been acting up for a few days, but this morning the system flagged a warning." Alara's heart skipped a beat. The water recyclers were critical to the colony's survival. Without them, the settlement could face shortages or worse. She nodded, understanding the seriousness of the situation. I can help," she said. "I've learned a lot with you already. I think I could be useful." Calder looked at her, his sharp eyes studying her closely. Then he nodded slowly. "Good. We'll need all hands, and your understanding of these systems will help. But remember, observe first, act carefully. The equipment is old, fragile, and needs respect." By mid-morning, they were on the dirt path leading from the homestead toward the colony. The twin suns were high, casting long shadows from the scattered domes and vehicles. The journey was quiet except for the sound of their boots on the hard-packed dirt and the occasional whistle of wind through the hills. Calder rarely spoke while they walked, his focus always on the terrain and the systems they might encounter. Ilara followed closely, her own mind alert and attentive. When they reached the settlement, the problem was immediately clear. The colony's main water recyclers were sputtering, producing inconsistent output. A few settlers had already gathered, their faces lined with worry and uncertainty. "Calder," called one of the technicians, a young woman named Myra. "We've tried everything, but the system keeps failing. We don't know what to do," Calder nodded calmly. "Show me the readings. Let's take it step by step." Ilara watched as Calder moved among the machinery with practiced ease. He checked each panel, adjusted valves, and recalibrated sensors. His movements were precise, deliberate, and quiet, yet every action carried confidence. He did not rush, did not panic, and did not complain. "You're fast," Myra said, glancing at Ilara. "And you seem to know the controls well. Did Calder teach you?" Ilara nodded. "Yes, he showed me the systems at our homestead. I've learned by observing and helping." "Good," Myra said. "We need every hand. This could get serious if we don't fix it soon." Calder gave Ilara a small, approving nod. "Observe first," he reminded her. "Check the valves and make sure the flow is steady. Adjust only when you understand the cause." Ilara took a deep breath, moving carefully among the machinery. She checked the readings, followed the flow of water, and noted irregularities. Calder guided her with quiet instructions, pointing out small details she might otherwise have missed. Together, they worked steadily, calmly, methodically. Hours passed, but the atmosphere in the settlement began to shift. The fear and uncertainty were replaced by quiet determination. Settlers who had been anxious and tense began to work with focus, following Calder's example. And Ilara, too, felt a sense of pride. She was contributing, making a difference, and her actions mattered. Finally, after careful adjustments and testing, the system stabilized. The water flowed steadily, clean and reliable through the colony's pipes. Settlers cheered softly, relief spreading across their faces. Calder wiped his hands on a cloth, standing back to survey the repaired machinery. "It's working," he said simply. "Make sure to monitor it over the next few days. Nothing lasts forever, but for now it's stable." Ilara felt a rush of satisfaction. She had played a role in solving a problem that could have affected dozens of lives. She realized then that the frontier was not just about isolation or survival. It was about human ingenuity, collaboration, and responsibility. Humans thrived not because life was easy, but because they cared enough to act when it was hard. As they prepared to return to the homestead, Myra approached Ilara. "You've got a steady hand and a sharp mind," she said. "You could do a lot for the colony if you wanted. Calder's teaching has clearly helped you a lot." Ilara smiled, feeling warmth and pride. I want to help, but I also like the quiet here where I can learn and contribute at my own pace." Myra nodded. "Understandable, but know that you're valued. Humans are stronger than we often believe, especially when we work together. You've proven that today." The journey back to the homestead was quieter than the trip to the settlement. The suns had begun their descent, painting the hills in shades of orange and red. Ilara walked beside Calder, reflecting on the day's events. She realized that she had grown stronger, not just in skill but in confidence. She had faced a challenge, contributed to a larger effort, and discovered the importance of patience, observation, and careful action. At the homestead, Calder allowed her a moment to rest before dinner. She sat outside, watching the twin moons rise into the sky. The wind whispered across the hills, carrying the scent of dry earth and wildflowers. The world was vast and sometimes harsh, but it was alive, full of opportunity, and filled with humans who chose to make a difference. Calder joined her, handing her a cup of tea. They sat in silence for a few moments, enjoying the calm after a long day. Then Calder spoke, his voice quiet and reflective. "Humans endure because we choose to act when it is hard," he said. "We face problems, we fail sometimes, but we try again. That's what makes us strong. That's what allows us to survive and even thrive on worlds like this." Alara nodded, understanding. "I see it now. Life here, it's not about comfort, it's about effort, responsibility, and care, about choosing to help when no one else will." Calder smiled faintly. "Exactly, and today you made that choice. You contributed. You observed, acted, and learned. That is human strength." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had never felt this sense of accomplishment before. Back on Earth, she had been judged and dismissed for things she could not control. Here on the frontier, her actions mattered. Her care and effort had real consequences, real impact. She was no longer a stranger, a rejected bride, or a passive observer. She was part of something larger, a human story of resilience, collaboration, and hope. As the night deepened, they prepared a simple meal and ate quietly. Calder shared small stories of other settlers, tales of people who had faced impossible odds and found ways to endure. Alara listened with fascination, feeling inspired by their determination and courage. She realized that humanity's true power was not in technology, not in numbers or weapons, but in the quiet courage to act, to care, and to persist. After dinner, Calder handed her a small notebook. "Write down what you learn," he suggested. "One day you may teach someone else." Humans grow stronger when knowledge is shared. Alara took the notebook eagerly, feeling a sense of purpose she had never experienced. She opened the first page and began to write. Notes about the water system, observations about the land, lessons Calder had taught her about patience, care, and human ingenuity. The twin moons rose higher, casting silver light across the hills and the homestead. The night was quiet, save for the soft whistle of wind and the distant hum of machinery. Alara closed her notebook and looked at Calder, feeling gratitude and admiration. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything today, for teaching me, for letting me be part of this." Calder nodded. "Everyone has something to give. Today you gave what was needed. Tomorrow you will give more. And that is how humans survive and thrive." Alara lay in her small bed that night, reflecting on the day's events. She thought about the colony, the settlers, the machinery, and the choices that had made the difference between success and failure. She understood now that life on Kestrel's Reach was a test of patience, skill, and humanity. She had faced the challenge, acted with care, and contributed to something greater than herself. For the first time, she felt truly confident in her abilities. She was no longer just the bride who had been turned away. She was a human being, capable, resilient, and valuable. And she had discovered a truth that would stay with her for the rest of her life. Humanity's greatest strength was not power, numbers, or technology. It was the courage to act, to care, and to persist, even in the face of uncertainty. As she drifted to sleep, the twin moons of Kestrel's Reach cast a gentle light across the homestead. Outside, the wind whispered through the hills, carrying the promise of new challenges, new lessons, and new opportunities. Alara knew that whatever the future held, she was ready. With Calder by her side, and with the lessons of the frontier guiding her, she could face anything. And tomorrow, she would rise again, stronger, wiser, and more determined to contribute to the human story on this distant world. The morning air on Kestrel's Reach was crisp and clear, carrying the scent of dry soil and wildflowers. Alara then stepped outside, stretching her arms to feel the warmth of the twin suns as they slowly climbed over the hills. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the homestead, the careful work, the quiet routines, and the steady presence of Calder Hale. Life here had changed her, shaping her into someone stronger, more capable, and more confident than she had ever imagined. Breakfast was simple, porridge with dried fruits and a small cup of tea. Ilara served herself and set the table for Calder, who arrived moments later, brushing his hands on a cloth after tending the solar panels. His expression was calm, almost unreadable, yet there was a subtle warmth in his eyes that Ilara had come to rely on. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied, smiling. The homestead was alive with quiet activity. Birds sang faintly from the hills, and the wind whispered through the wildflowers surrounding the house. Ilara noticed that she no longer felt fear or uncertainty here. The homestead, Calder, and even the harsh landscape itself had become part of her life, a life she had chosen, even if she had not known it at first. After breakfast, Calder handed her a small set of tools. "Today, we'll prepare the northern fence. The wind has been strong and the livestock need protection." Ilara nodded. She felt ready for the task. Over the past weeks, she had learned so much: how to tend the garden, repair machinery, maintain the water system, and now care for the livestock. Each day had taught her patience, skill, and the importance of quiet effort. She knew that life here demanded resilience, but it also offered rewards: safety, satisfaction, and the knowledge that every action mattered. They walked together toward the northern fence. Calder showed her how to check the posts for stability, how to reinforce weak points, and how to repair broken wires. Ilara followed carefully, listening to his instructions and observing his methods. He never rushed her, never criticized, only guided her gently when necessary. "You're learning fast," Calder remarked as they worked. "Faster than I expected. Not just the tasks, but the way you think. You observe, consider, and act. That is the best way to survive here." Ilara felt a warm glow of pride. She had grown so much since her arrival. She was no longer the timid, uncertain bride turned away by the colony. She was a part of this place, capable and valuable. Every action she took contributed to the homestead's survival and comfort. By midday, the northern fence was secure. The livestock were safe, and the wind no longer threatened their pens. Ilara wiped the sweat from her brow and sat on a nearby rock, watching Calder finish his checks. He moved with quiet confidence, each action purposeful, yet unassuming. "You know," Calder said, finally looking at her, "you could leave, reapply for the colony's assignments. They would welcome someone with your skills." Ilara turned to him, startled. "Leave? But why would I?" "I'm just saying," Calder replied. "The colony might offer a life easier than this. More comfort, more people, less isolation." Ilara thought for a moment. She remembered the rejection, the loneliness, the endless searching for someone who would accept her. And then she thought about Calder, the homestead, the quiet strength and care that defined life here. She realized that she no longer desired comfort at the expense of purpose. She no longer wished to leave the frontier for the predictable safety of the colony. "I don't want to leave," she said finally. "Not anymore. This is where I belong. I want to stay here with you and continue learning, contributing, living." Calder studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded slowly, a small smile touching his lips. "Good. I think that's wise." Ilara felt a deep sense of relief and happiness. For the first time, she had made a choice entirely for herself, not based on contracts, expectations, or the approval of others. She had chosen a life of meaning, connection, and quiet resilience. And she had chosen to stay with Calder, who had shown her the best of humanity through patience, skill, and kindness. The rest of the day passed in routine. Ilara tended the garden, checked the water system, and helped Calder with minor repairs. Each task felt significant. Each small success brought satisfaction. She had learned that life on the frontier was not about ease or luxury. It was about persistence, effort, and the courage to face challenges with calm determination. In the evening, Calder and Ilara sat outside, watching the twin moons rise over the hills. The sky was a deep indigo, studded with countless stars. The wind whispered softly through the wildflowers, carrying the scent of the distant hills and the promise of tomorrow. "You've changed," Calder said quietly. "Since you arrived, you've grown stronger, more confident, more capable. You've learned what it takes to live here, and you've proven that you can endure and thrive." Alara smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. "I've learned from you," she said. "You taught me patience, care, and how to observe before acting. You showed me that kindness matters and that humans endure because we choose to act, to help, and to persist." Calder nodded. "Humans endure not because life is easy, but because we care. Because we face challenges and keep going, even when it's hard. That is what makes us strong." Alara leaned back, feeling the calm of the night and the presence of the man beside her. For the first time in her life, she felt truly at home. The rejection, the loneliness, and the uncertainty of the past seemed distant, replaced by purpose, belonging, and hope. "Tomorrow," she said softly, "we'll continue working on the eastern fence and check the water system again, and I'll help with the livestock." Calder smiled faintly. "Tomorrow will come, and you'll face it as you always do, with care, attention, and effort. That is how humans survive and thrive." As the nights passed, Alara found herself writing in her notebook each evening. She recorded lessons, observations, and small victories. She documented the systems she had learned, the repairs she had made, and the routines she now followed effortlessly. In these pages, she captured not just the practical knowledge of survival, but the lessons of life itself: patience, kindness, resilience, and the importance of contributing to something larger than oneself. The homestead flourished under their care. The garden thrived, the livestock were healthy, and the water system ran smoothly. Alara found joy in the small successes, pride in her contributions, and comfort in the steady rhythms of life. She and Calder worked together, their companionship quiet but deep, built on trust, respect, and shared purpose. One evening, as they sat watching the stars, Calder spoke again. "You've chosen to stay. That is good. You've found a place where your efforts matter, where your presence has meaning. That is rare in this universe." Alara smiled, feeling a profound sense of fulfillment. "I've found more than a home," she said. "I've found purpose, connection, and hope. And I've learned that humans endure not because of contracts or plans or convenience, but because we care, we act, and we persist." Calder nodded, a quiet acknowledgement of her words. "Exactly. That is the best of humanity, and now you are a part of it. Here on Kestrel's Reach, we face challenges, we work hard, and we survive. And we do so together." Alara felt a warmth spread through her chest. She had come to this world expecting rejection and loneliness, and instead she had found trust, kindness, and the chance to grow. She had learned that humans thrived not through comfort, but through effort, care, and resilience. The twin moons of Kestrel's Reach glowed softly, casting silver light over the homestead. The wind whispered through the hills, carrying the scent of distant flora and the quiet promise of tomorrow. Alara lay in bed that night, reflecting on her journey. She had been turned away by all, faced uncertainty, and endured loneliness. Yet she had found a place to belong, a life of purpose, and a human companion whose quiet kindness revealed the best of humanity. And she knew that this was only the beginning. Tomorrow would bring more work, new challenges, and new lessons. But she was ready. She had chosen to stay, to contribute, and to thrive. With Calder beside her, and with the lessons of patience, care, and resilience guiding her, she could face anything. For the first time, she understood that a home was not just a place or a roof over her head. A home was where she was valued, where her actions mattered, where kindness and effort created meaning. And in Calder's quiet homestead on Kestrel's Reach, she had found that home. As she drifted to sleep, the stars shimmered overhead, the wind whispered through the hills, and the universe stretched vast and full of possibilities. Alara smiled, knowing that she had discovered something rare and precious. A life chosen, a purpose earned, and a place where humanity's best qualities, care, courage, and resilience, shone brightest. She had arrived as a stranger, turned away by all, and now she stayed by choice. And for the first time, she felt truly at home.